Pack Nation? Thank you guys so much for joining our channel here and finding this here at this video. We're really excited today hosting Trevor Williams from The Nation with Texas Tech Red Raiders. We're really excited about the matchup coming up this Saturday in Carter Finley Stadium at 7 o'clock on ESPN2. And it would make sense. This is the episode number 2 also for this preview. We're really excited, Trevor, to have you. How are you doing?
Doing well. How are you guys?
Doing really well, man. We had the first episode. We were talking about the Texas Tech program as a whole and overview. I know we talked about how there's some really nice alums there that have been donating. We've talked about, Patrick Mahomes a little bit. I feel like there's other alums that people should know about too, like Wes Welker went at Texas Tech, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And there's a guy in preseason for the Dolphins, Eric Ezukanma?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, he looked really good. So there's a lot of good players coming out of Texas Tech, and really excited to host the Red Raiders this weekend. But I'll get started here, Trevor. Looking at the quarterback position, it's kind of unique right now, I feel like, for Texas Tech. You have a starter in Tyler Shough. Is it Show or Shoe, or how you pronounce that?
Shuck, actually.
Shuck. Okay. So Tyler Shuck, and he's been the starter. And I don't know if he played last season, but I know he started off against Murray State, and then now he's been injured. And you have Donovan Smith coming in, and he was graded out really well PFF in the Murray State game. Houston, tougher opponent, still had some good grades there. But he's my understanding is the fans almost viewed like you have 2 potential starters there at quarterback. Can you talk a little bit about Shuck, and can you talk a little bit about Donovan Smith there?
Yeah, so Shuck joined from Oregon last season, and he was the starter going into the year. He started the first 3 games, the first of which was a comeback victory against Houston in Houston. And then in the 3rd game in Austin against Texas, unfortunately had a season-ending collarbone injury. And then we ended up in this situation where we had some other quarterbacks from the Matt Wells era and staff that played a little bit there in the middle of the season, and then eventually we landed on Donovan Smith to close out the year last year, led us to a bowl victory against Mississippi State. And then this season, going into the year, there was a 3-headed race for the QB1 spot with Shuck coming back from injury, Donovan Smith, who obviously, led us to the bowl victory last year and had a lot of hype around him going into the year, and then also a highly touted recruit, Baron Morton, who is from here in Texas, from Eastland, and this is his sophomore year. So there was a quarterback competition, and from all accounts, it was a very even competition. It seemed like any guy could win the job. In fact, a lot of people, from what I heard, thought that Donovan probably should have won the job to start. But yeah, unfortunately, Shuck was hurt in the first quarter of the Murray State game. Again, it's the same shoulder. I think it's a little bit less severe of an injury this year, but still going to be out for a month or a little over a month. So obviously went with Donovan Smith to start the Houston game. And yeah, like you said, the grades on PFF and everything being very high is no shock to anybody, especially those of us who watched the Mississippi State game. He can do it with his legs. He can move around. He's got a very powerful arm. And in some circumstances, the arm and how he can play around in the pocket and then throw off balance is a little Mahomes-esque. I wouldn't say he has the same arm talent as Mahomes or same overall talent, raw talent as Mahomes, but the things that he can do, off script are, has the fan base pretty excited. I think that's why there's some excitement around him. But no, he obviously, like you mentioned, a little bit of a down spot against Houston. A few interceptions, tried to force some balls. There was one late that almost cost the game, tied up, about to go into overtime, and just forced a deep ball into some tight coverage. But aside from that, a lot of it was, like we'd mentioned in the first episode, some O-line issues that was allowing pressure all day. So some of that's a little give and take. You can't put that all on the quarterback when he knows, the internal clock in the head has got to be a little quicker because he's got guys in his face the whole game.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
So with the offense, and this is kind of offense and defensive question, but what seems to be the philosophy, obviously with the air raid offense and Zach Hitley, it's, throw the ball a lot, score a lot of points. Is Joey McGuire trying to be more balanced between that air raid offense and defense, or is it just we're going to go out and we're going to score more points than you? Because I know there's some teams, especially in the ACC, that do that, like UNC and Wake, who just don't play defense. But what seems to be the philosophy there?
It seems that Joey McGuire, coming from more of a defensive background already, definitely wants to establish a more pronounced and scarier defense than Texas Tech has been known for in the past. And like we had mentioned in episode 1, there was in the Cliff Kingsbury era, the game totals were usually set, 60s, 70s, sometimes upper 70s, just because of the lack of defense that was going to be played. But on the offensive side with Kitley, I think, the beauty of Kitley's system is that if we need to get in a shootout, it's very possible, and schematically, the air raid obviously allows for that. But looking through the first 2 games, and the first one being a blowout against Murray State may skew it a little bit. But, 95 pass attempts to 73 rushing attempts, relatively balanced and maybe a little more balanced than a traditional, Mike Leach or Cliff Kingsbury offense would look like.
Right.
I'll be curious to see how that shakes out playing some tougher opponents like NC State and playing Texas as well. But it seems that the offense, like we mentioned with Kitley, comes from an air raid background. Bailey Zappi broke all kinds of records last year in his system. There's the capability to throw the ball, throw it often, and get downfield. But we've seen in the first couple of games, there's some tunnel screens and some slip screens and things here and there where just trying to get the playmakers out in open space and let them make plays. We have 3 tight ends. They're absolutely humongous. And so they have been finding ways, at least in the first couple of games, to find them in advantageous matchups over the middle and the red zone, things like that. We've seen some targets in the red zone going up high. So, it's kind of a whatever the defense gives you will do type of thing. But obviously a tendency, I think, a little bit more towards airing it out.
I got you. So I'm curious. You mentioned Michael's talking about balance there as far as playing strong football on offense and defense. I want to, on the offensive side, focusing there for a little while. Do you see what do you think the philosophy is on running the ball? I mean, is there a philosophy there? Do they run when they just have to? Do they want to mix that in pretty well? I saw watching at least the Houston game. I think it was. I'm looking here. Your running back Brooks had a decent game.
Yep.
Had a really nice game, particularly. I think his highest grade was pass blocking, so he talked about that. So what is the thought about running the ball there? Is it just when you have to, or is it like, no, we're going to do 50-50, or what are your thoughts there?
It looks like in both of the 2 games they've come out and wanted to, establish the run a little bit and get the line moving downhill to set up passing, obviously. But in the Houston game, there were a few, quarterback draws called on, 3rd and long, 2nd and long, times where normally you would think an air raid offense would be throwing the ball. And so, whether that's a byproduct of just having a mobile quarterback in Donovan Smith, or if that's part of the game plan to exploit the defense or part of the scheme, I'm not sure, obviously. But I will say there were, I think there was some fan base that wasn't happy on some of the play calling and decision making, like we'd mentioned late in the game, in that Houston game, that looked like it was going to cost us potentially. And some of them were run plays on those downs and distances where you would assume that Kitley has, an entire page of pass concepts to get somebody open. And so it looked to me a little bit like they were trying to force Donovan Smith running the ball. And like I said, I don't know if that's something that they saw in film that they could exploit with Houston, but didn't have the success that I think they were looking for there. But with the running backs, like you said, Taj Brooks had a great game. There was even a report that Joey McGuire was asked if there's some things behind the scenes that maybe the fans wouldn't know. And so we kind of have a, 2-headed running back system there with Taj Brooks and Sir Roderick Thompson. And he said that in the middle of the Houston game, Taj Brooks was playing so well that Sir Roderick Thompson went up to him and said, "Hey, Taj is playing good. Let's roll with Taj." And so it's just things like that where, like I mentioned, I think whatever's working for the offense is what they're going to do, and I think everyone's on board with that.
Yeah, he played 67 snaps recorded here. It looks like Taj had a nice game. I'm curious too. We haven't really talked much about the receivers, and we keep talking about them throwing the ball. We haven't really heard you talk about that. I looks like you got a few really good receivers there. I think your leading receiver looks like it's Jared Bradley.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about him or any of the other receivers and what their specialties are, if you will? Where do they stand out?
Yeah, so Jared Bradley, pretty big body, can get downfield and go up and high point the ball. Also, we've seen him, on the sidelines being able to use his body to create some separation there in some tight windows. You got Loic Fungi, who is a little smaller, I believe, than Jaron, but a good route runner, can get all over the field, and then Miles Price as well. And those are kind of the three main guys that Texas Tech was looking at going into the season. One of the surprises from last week was Nemai Martinez, who is actually a Lubbock native, walked onto the team and got his first collegiate touchdown. And he looked great. He was coming out of the backfield running routes in open space. He was making people miss. He was kind of a surprise of the week, I would say, for the offense. And we also have, like I mentioned, the three big body tight ends. So there's a lot of options there within the offense, and I'm excited to see how Kitley evolves throughout the year with his play calling and scheming up some of these guys' specialties getting open. But yeah, there's a lot of options there for the offense. Yeah,
Nehemiah, you mentioned him being the surprise. He was the highest graded receiver for y'all last week. Yeah. So on Pro PFF. So that's really impressive to see that you've got like four options there. I'm going to shift over here to the defensive side of the ball because I feel like that's been this season one thing that I've been pleasantly surprised watching and looking into Texas Tech a little bit. They've seemed to be a really underrated defensive side of the ball. And, they were, Houston had some plays, but there were some picks that were made by the defensive side of the ball for Texas Tech too. Can you talk about, the strengths and weaknesses of your defensive unit?
Yeah, coming into the season, the defensive line was the greatest strength that we knew we had coming in. Up the middle linebacker is pretty solid as well. I think outside linebacker was kind of a question mark. And then the secondary returned a few guys. But the secondary has really been the Achilles heel of the Texas Tech defense for as long as most fans can remember. And in game one against Murray State, early on at least, it looked like that was going to continue this year. And for the not casual fans watching, even though it was a blowout, that was a question mark and obviously something to be a little concerned about when, Murray State is kind of carving up your secondary. But in the Houston game, that flipped. It was a complete 180. And Clayton Tune, very good quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks in the American Athletic Conference, was like 21 for 40, I think, 20 for 39, 44 QBR. And a lot of that was due to the secondary. And even when he had time to throw, it felt like the secondary was finally a cohesive unit for once, which is something that Tech fans have not been used to and are not used to. So it was definitely a pleasant surprise to see this past weekend.
That's awesome. So, is there you mentioned that being there you said the defensive line there. I've noticed that some of your linebacking core looks really strong. Can you talk about those guys? Yeah,
Krishawn Merriweather, he got hurt in the game. I think he should be playing. I'm not positive on that one. But Krishawn Merriweather is a great inside linebacker for us. Like I mentioned, the outside linebackers kind of rotate in and out, and it's not as strong of a group for us. But no, Merriweather is good up front. And then in the middle, Tony Bradford at the defensive line, at defensive tackle spot, can kind of be a plug there as far as, run defense, and then also can get to the quarterback a little bit as well.
Before we continue, I want to take a quick second to tell you about our sponsor, Flightland's Jessup Insurance Group, that has your whole world covered, with agents in 5 offices throughout eastern North Carolina to help you decide how much coverage you need. offering policies for home and auto, recreational vehicles, commercial, crop, health, life, and employee benefits. They are able to combine options to find a comprehensive solution that works for you. Flatlands Jessup protects the things you love so you can spend less time worrying and more time enjoying them. Find them on Facebook and Instagram at Flatlands Jessup. You can also visit their webpage at www.flatlandsjessup.com. So please make sure to go and check them out.
Yeah, I was looking here. You mentioned Merriweather. First name you mentioned. Last week against Houston, he was the highest graded player for Texas Tech last week. So, I mean, I think for State fans, you kind of sound like that front. Is it a 4-3-4 scheme? What is the scheme they run there on defense?
It's 4 down, and then obviously linebackers will change with the package. But yeah, 4 down.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm curious. It sounds like that's your strength is up front. So do you guys rely on getting the sacks and getting pressure on the QB to relieve your secondary? Is that how y'all looking at it?
I think so far, and with Tyree Wilson as well, he's on the defensive line, being mocked like in the first round of the NFL draft.
He got a high grade too. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is definitely a strength of the defense, and I do think that obviously will help the secondary not having to cover for as long. But yeah, I mean, run defense and pass defense both. The defensive line have set a pretty good anchor for the Tech defense so far through 2 games.
That's awesome. So go ahead, Michael. You got it.
Coming into this game, what is one thing if Texas Tech is going to win? What is one thing they need to do perfectly in the game plan?
I would say if Texas Tech is going to win, since it's a hostile environment on the road, the offensive line, needs to have their protection down. They need to have, obviously snap counts. It's probably going to be very loud. So false starts, things like that, allowing pressures, allowing sacks. If Texas Tech is going to win, the offensive line is going to need to completely look different from last week. It was almost the turning point of the game last week. And if Texas Tech wants to win, at North Carolina State, it's going to have to be the O-line that plays a perfect game.
Well, then I guess likewise, what does it sounds like you kind of answered it 2 ways. It sounds like it's all going to come down to your offensive line plays. What it sounds like. Is that what you would say? It
feels like it. And then I would add on the defensive side, obviously facing a really good quarterback and probably the best quarterback that they faced so far through 3 games. The secondary is going to need to have a performance similar to last week's and not, week 1 against Murray State. So hopefully that's something that continues from the secondary and doesn't revert back to their old ways. But that's a kind of a question mark on the defensive side, I think, at least until we see them, consecutively make these adjustments and be able to kind of blank the opposition's passing game.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Go, Michael. You got a question for him?
I was going to ask you, what do you think NC State needs to do to win the game?
You asking me or are you asking Trevor?
Yeah. No, make it
me.
What do you think?
What do I think State needs to do? So I think State has really done well at a few things. I think they've really done well at being their secondary has been very good lately. I think that if State is going to win this game, I really think that I think the secondary is going to have to really shine here. I think there's a chance that they could really make an impact on this game and really kind of feature how strong the unit is. But I think we talked about it in our live show we had this week. I think our defensive line is going to need to play really well. It's, to be honest, to be blunt, it is kind of encouraging hearing you say that about the offensive line for Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Where I will tell you that on another note, the defensive line, State runs a 3-3-5 a lot of times. That's their base package they run. And the linebackers are the strongest part of our team. I will tell you that they have guys who are just Drake Thomas, Peyton Wilson, Isaiah Moore, and the backups behind them are really good. But the defense, I would say the biggest thing is they've not had a great pass rush. They've not been able to get sacks. And they've played East Carolina, who is a respectable opponent, and Charleston Southern. They were able to get pressure. They were able to, 10 QB hurries against Charleston Southern, but they weren't able to really get the quarterback on the ground. Mm-hmm. So, part of me wants to say the secondary, but now I mentioned it, I do think the defensive line is going to need to play great. If the defensive line can get sacks in this game, I'm confident in our offense. I'm confident in our secondary and our linebackers. I'm just concerned if we let Donovan Smith sit there and throw the ball the whole day. I mean, I trust our secondary, but particularly if he can run, that just kind of makes me a little nervous. Yeah. Just being able to get to him. If he's sitting there 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds throwing the ball, that's not a recipe for success. So that's my concern for State. But to win, I think the defense is going to need to be, that comes down to the defensive line being the make or break for us, to be honest with you. What do you think, Michael?
I think our running game, Trevor, you mentioned the defensive line and linebackers being the strength of that unit. And that was our running game was a concern coming into the season. We were last in the ACC last year. So far,
second to last.
Second to last.
Yeah.
So far, it's looked better this season through 2 games. But yeah, I think if we can have success running the ball against the Texas Tech front 7 or however many it is, I think that will go a long way for us.
Yeah. So I guess to wrap it up here, Trevor, I'll leave it open if you want to give a score prediction or a game prediction of the outcome. You don't have to, but how are you feeling? How is the nation feeling about this game? Not necessarily just the fans, but from y'all's perspective, how are y'all feeling about the game?
I think it's going to be a good litmus test for where the program is sitting at through 3 games. Obviously, it's a new coaching staff. I don't expect Texas Tech to walk in there and win, especially not easily. Obviously, if it is a win, I think it's going to be a grind to get there. But I do think what's more important to me than the end result is how does the team respond to the adversity of playing on the road for the first time, playing a ranked opponent on the road at night. That's a little more important to me than the end result. I mentioned, Donovan Smith came in at the end of last year and did some great things, helped us beat Iowa State at home, led us to a win in the bowl game. But he's never started a game and won on the road. So that's not something easy, and it's especially not easy to go and do against a ranked non-conference opponent that you're not familiar with either. So I think, as far as game prediction, I think something like 35-24 NC State, maybe somewhere in that range, probably sounds about what I would expect. I said, we'll see if the secondary can hold up 2 games in a row. Clayton Tune, obviously, we looked pretty good against him. It was a home game. So I'm interested to see how the secondary and defense holds up against Devin Leary at NC State.
Yeah, I will tell you, I don't think State fans feel overly confident. I know you said Texas Tech fans maybe feel that way a little bit, but for me personally, and I think for most fan bases, I think to give Texas fans some, I don't say hope, like they don't have any, but just to kind of give them an inside perspective, State fans, they almost lost that game against East Carolina. Yeah, people don't realize how tough a game that was going to be for NC State because that's ECU's Super Bowl. We had a guy from the Boneyard podcast who does ECU, and he's like talking about how, I would never let my child go to NC State. We hate them and blah, blah, blah. And it's like they hate NC State. And it was a game where I thought we played kind of vanilla or plain. I didn't think we really wanted to show a lot. and we played a little too conservatively, and we kind of shot ourselves in the foot there second half, just not – I won't say penalties. There were some penalties there, but we had poor tackling.
Yeah.
That definitely changed. They said the practice week going into Charleston Southern this past week was miserable because they were making them play. They were making them practice their butts off. Yeah. But I don't think State fans feel like, oh yeah, we're ranked number 16. We're gonna just No, they don't feel that way. Sure. They look at this as like, this is going to be our true test, and we've seen one true test kind of not look so great. Although State was up 21-7 at halftime, they just were playing casual that game. I don't think you're going to see them play casual, but I do think there's a sense of, hey man, this could be a game. I would not be surprised to see State lose, just because there's the NC State expression of there's NC State stuff. Usually there's another word following and substitute for stuff. Yeah. But, I think State fans think they will win the game, that State's going to win the game. Again, playing inside Carter Finley Stadium at night historically has been very positive for State, as I imagine most games are for any home team at night. Yeah. Right. So I think we feel good, but I do think there's an opening. We do feel like, Texas Tech has a really good shot. They're a really good team. They really throw the ball around very well. I think the defense is very underrated for Texas Tech. I think it'll be an exciting game. I'm just my last question for you is: do you think any Texas Tech fans will travel well for this game?
It's
a long ways away.
It is a long ways away, but like for the basketball program, the past few years we've been fortunate enough to have some games in like Madison Square Garden and some very cool venues like that, and it seems that the fans do travel well. And the alumni base is very, very large. The undergrad, I think it's like 40,000 and growing, or 35,000 and growing. Wow. It's a large, alumni base, and it's spread out all over the country. So, obviously, I don't think it's going to be super packed, but I think you'll see a decent amount of them. I will give you and your fans one other thing that maybe may give you a little more confidence going into the weekend. Next weekend, Texas Tech hosts UT.
I saw this. Yeah, I saw that.
Potentially the last time in the Big 12, and that is looming large, I think, on everyone's calendars, and everyone knows. And I hope that this is not a look ahead spot or something where they get down early and throw in the towel. So that's kind of as I was mentioning earlier with the new Joey McGuire regime. That's what I'm most curious to see, is responding to some adversity and being able to play if they're down, being able to still play with some heart and some fight and some desire. And I think at the end of the day, that will be a positive for the program going forward.
Right.
Yeah, man. Hey, no Quinn Ewers. I mean, it'll be interesting to see Texas how they play. And is it in Austin or is it in Lubbock?
Lubbock.
Oh man, that's going to be an awesome environment. We'll have to make sure we tune in for that one. But before then, obviously, we've got this NC State Texas Tech game. So it might be hard spotting out the Texas Tech fans because they'll be wearing red, black, or white, just like NC State fans will. So yeah, and NC State, I would say, is the best tailgating school for football in the state. And you definitely, for the Texas Tech fans, those watching, definitely, the fans there are very welcome. You join the tailgates, I'm having a good time, very hospitable. It should be a really good environment if you're there. Very fun, but we're really looking forward to this game. And Trevor, we're really thankful, man, that we had you on with the Nation podcast and show. And could you give the fans at NC State any idea where they can find you?
Yeah, so on Twitter @GunsUpNation is where you can find all of our tweets and all of the links to any articles and podcasts and anything like that.
Awesome. Well, guys, that wraps up this preview, episode 2 for Texas Tech. We're really excited about this game. I really enjoyed this interview here with the Nation, Trevor. So, guys, be sure to like and subscribe, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to join as a member to this channel. We got some exclusive interviews we do with a whole host of other recruits and commits and things like that, and special topics we talk about. So really appreciate y'all joining this channel and supporting this channel. Looking forward to seeing you guys in Raleigh Saturday night at 7:00. Tailgating starts at 2 for those who do that. It's going to be really fun, but should be an awesome game. So as always, go Pack, guys.